Much of August 2005 is burned into my mind. Other parts are a blur. I spent my 20th birthday on top of the Sheraton Hotel, the tallest building in Baghdad. My platoon had been separated from the rest of our company and assigned to an overwatch position. No internet, no phones, no TV, no mail. Our whole world was the war. And even within that, our whole world was the roof of that hotel. My job was to call out the direction and distance of every explosion that I saw. Most days, I didn't see the blast itself. I'd feel it, I'd hear it, then I'd turn and see the smoke rising. I'd get on the radio, report what I saw, and pass on information to units that I didn't even know. Because from that high up, you could see into sectors that were divided between divisions, brigades, and battalions all across the area. The Sheraton had once been a symbol of luxury. By the time that we occupied it, it was filthy, just another outpost in a war that was dragging on. From the top of that building, we could see a giant S on the ground below. Now, war zones have their own urban legends. The soldiers who we relieved from that outpost told us that Saddam's sons, Uday and Qusay, used to throw people off of the roof, trying to make them land in the middle of that S. I don't know if that story was true, but after the things that I had witnessed in the 8 months in Iraq and what human beings were capable of doing to one another, I imagined it could be true. After our rotation at the Sheraton, we were sent back to Fob Hope, a small base just outside Sadr City, a place that had suffered under Saddam and was still suffering under us. From there, we were reassigned to Camp Liberty, one of the largest U.S. installations in Iraq, connected to Baghdad International Airport, so that we could relieve some soldiers with the Louisiana National Guard who were heading home. The first squad from our platoon to make that move as part of the company's advance party was hit by an IED. It was the first Bradley fighting vehicle my company lost in 8 months of combat. Thankfully, my friends survived the blast. Days later, I made that same journey, riding in the turret of our specially outfitted Bradley, the one made for my team of forward observers. We had no choice but to take the highways. And in Iraq, every overpass, every pile of garbage, every pothole, every animal carcass, any one of them could be a bomb. As we got closer to Camp Liberty, I saw something spray painted over an overpass that I'll never forget. "We will bring you 1,000 Katrinas." I thought it was funny at the time because it was misspelled. Unlike most Americans, I didn't witness the horror of Hurricane Katrina in real time. I was deployed. I knew that it happened, but didn't fully appreciate the way that it happened, and how our government's response made things so much worse. The old newspapers that took forever to reach me couldn't possibly tell the same story that cable television did to other Americans. The papers, as I was reading them, couldn't capture the devastation, the unnecessary suffering, and the chaos the way that video can. It wasn't until I came home that I began to understand the full scale of what happened and what our government failed to do. What I didn't know at the time was that while I was trying to survive in Iraq, General Russel Honoré had become a household name in the United States after he got off of a helicopter shouting orders, telling troops and police to lower their weapons, weapons that they had trained on American civilians, people who were desperate for help. He wasn't just coordinating logistics or running press briefings. He was reminding police and soldiers of their duty, of who they served. He was doing in that moment what a real leader does, protecting the people and protecting the integrity of the military. That's why I wanted to talk to him for this podcast, because 20 years later, we're in a different kind of disaster, one that's being manufactured from the top, but in a far worse way than President Bush did with his incompetence. President Trump is actively deploying the National Guard and even active duty troops across American cities, not for a hurricane or any other sort of natural disaster, but to harass and intimidate his perceived political enemies, our fellow Americans, to assist with immigration raids, to engage in protest crackdowns. Under the guise of law and order, Donald Trump is corrupting the military that General Honoré and I both served in and turning it into an authoritarian tool. General Honoré has seen what happens when government fails the people, He's also seen how quickly things can turn violent when the military is used the wrong way. And he's here to tell us this moment is a test of leadership, a test of democracy, a test of whether those of us who swore an oath are still willing to defend it. Lieutenant General Russel Honoré is a retired three-star general who spent 37 years in the U.S. Army. He's best known for leading Joint Task Force Katrina, a military relief effort in response to one of the worst natural disasters in American history. He was born and raised in Louisiana, coming of age during the Jim Crow era. That experience shaped the leader he became, one who understands the stakes of government failure, the dangers of state violence, and the danger that sometimes comes with standing up for what's right. After the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, Speaker Nancy Pelosi tapped General Honoré to lead a comprehensive review of Capitol security. His findings led to major reforms in how Congress protects itself and the democratic process. Since retiring from the military, General Honoré has continued to speak out on disaster preparedness, civil-military relations, climate justice, and the responsibilities of leadership. And now, as President Trump erodes the boundaries between military force and domestic politics, General Honoré is raising his voice once again, because he knows just how dangerous this moment is. He joined me for a conversation about where we are in American history and what it will take to leave behind a stronger democracy than the one we inherited.
Hey, folks, before we get to the interview, just real quick, I want to apologize. You'll notice that the sound right now is different from the intro, and it will be different from the recording. I made a couple of big mistakes over the last couple of weeks, namely that I did not make sure that my input was to the correct microphone. Instead of this thing in front of me that you're hearing me through right now, for both the intro that I recorded and the interview, my earbuds were connected. So you, the listener, you deserve the best, and that's what I'm trying to bring to you. Please know that I have ordered some wired earbuds, monitors, whatever you call them, so that hopefully this never can happen again. And I just want to acknowledge that my poor editor has had to do a lot of work to try and clean up the sound. And I'm very sorry to my editor and to my producer, who've both put a lot of work into this episode. And, of course, I'm very sorry to General Honoré, who deserves better. The man is a hero. He took a lot of time out of his day to speak with me, and I hope that you listen to the entire episode, because what this man has done with his life and what he is saying today are critically important to our democracy. So it is my hope that you don't let a little bit of sound issues turn you off. I will do better moving forward. And now, back to the show.
General Honoré, it is an honor to meet you. So, you were born in 1947. You grew up in the Jim Crow South. You joined the Army in 1971, so at the tail end of the Vietnam conflict. So you have seen America, a version of America that I never experienced. I was born in 1985. So the version of America that you have lived through, I can only imagine what it looks like. So when I hear someone like you come forward and talk about your concerns with our democracy and comparing it to the America that you used to know, I find that frightening. And I kind of want to know, why is it that you feel compelled to speak out after all of this time, after all of you that you've given to this country? Why not just retire and enjoy your family?
Yeah, well, this is a part of being a citizen. we got an obligation to our ancestors to preserve what they gave us. You know, there's a theme I use in my speeches is we were born free by accident. We could have been born anywhere. It all depends where your mom was at the time of your birth. Could have been born anywhere in the world. The second point I emphasize is that we live free is a privilege that's been paid for by previous generations. I know each generation said, well, we saved our freedom, but we were able to do that because of the sacrifice and treasure of previous generation going back to the Revolutionary War. And my third point is to die free is an obligation, a responsibility. And that's a theme that stayed in my head, that until our last breath, we must be active, proactive citizens. And for the democracy to work, we all have to be engaged at the local, state, and federal level. And we must exercise our First Amendment right, or we're going to be a big disappointment to our ancestors. And in their own way and their own sacrifice, with all the positives and negatives that has happened in the past, we have an obligation to leave America free for the next generation.
One of the most famous clips of you, I think, that's in existence is when you got on the ground in New Orleans and you saw police and I believe maybe National Guardsmen with their weapons at the high ready in front of crowds of civilians after that area had been devastated and people were desperate for things like food and formula and diapers. And you just started shouting, "Weapons down, weapons down." And you saw everybody snap to they realized I fucked up. I'm gonna, get into the low ready. Now we seem to be in a new normal where law enforcement are shooting priests in the face with pepper balls. We are seeing more and more violent force being used against civilians, not just during protests, but in everyday interactions. Now that we have the National Guard and even the Marines deploying as within the United States, not responding to national disasters or even responding to protests, but it seems to me as if they're trying to provoke protests and provoke opportunities for violence. I think about the mindset that I was in when I first enlisted, when I was 18 years old. I was a high school student. I didn't know shit about the world. My version of normal was shaped in large part from the 90s when the world was, under the Clinton administration, everything looked pretty good. We thought our future was going to be bright. And then 9/11 happened. And that shaped, I think the way that we treated threats in the United States and externally. But at 18, and even after I came home from Iraq, especially after I came home from Iraq, I knew that holding a weapon at the high ready towards an American citizen was never going to be okay. The 18-year-old kids today that are serving the National Guard on active duty, their version of normal has been shaped since they were 8 years old. Donald Trump has been on the scene. He's been encouraging cops to rough up people that they're arresting. He's been talking about shooting protesters in the knees. He's even apparently tried to give that order to shoot American protesters. Are you concerned right now that there are some 18, 19-year-olds who've got a different version of normal than older generations have, who are currently in uniform, who are getting deployed out of their, Republican governor-led states into Democrat governor-led states? Do you think that this new version of normal is going to accelerate violence against American citizens?
It possibly could. I mean, look at Kent State. They thought they were doing their job, break up the protests. End up with 4 dead. Then 2 weeks later, 2 dead at Jackson State. HBCU in Jackson, Mississippi. It can be perceived as normal if we allow it to be. What we expect civil society to do and our elected officials is to keep that in check. And I think many, including myself, are somewhat disappointed that the three branches of government is not working. You know, there was a time when what happened at the Edmund Pettus Bridge, we watched it on television, and all law enforcement bought into it. Yeah, no, we're not going to let you march. We're going to beat you up and put you in jail for marching, exercising your First Amendment right. But that was kind of the norm then. But we thought that was in the rearview mirror. And then we took it around and look at what we saw in Chicago on the two incidents that you mentioned, that you don't need to read about it. You can watch it. You can see it. And it's flagrant. And it's defended at the highest level of government. The democracy to work, everybody has to be playing in the game. We're not spectators. The only way that democracy works is everybody is playing. You know, our big thing is we vote. But then we have to be vocal. We can't be spectators, particularly adults in this world, because if we become spectators, that's what our kids will do. If we accept everything we see, well, that's okay. They're doing it for the betterment. No. In a democracy, it only works as everybody play. Everybody vote. Why don't we have a rule that everybody votes? You want to have a damn driver's license, you got to vote. I mean, but I think that has caused people to become spectators. You can't be a spectator in a democracy. You have to be, everybody is a player. Now you got coaches and you got people on the field, but if I may use a sports analogy, but in a democracy, everybody's got to play, because Edmund Pettus Bridge become normal in the 21st century, based on what we saw in Chicago, and this concept of dehumanizing protesters. I mean, look what happened in the Black Lives Matter. When you count in the misinformation, disinformation that went out on what was actually happening in those protests. Or you look at the No Kings Day, and then the information came out, well, these people are not patriots. Well, the idea behind the patriots was to say no kings.
Yeah.
Going back to the Revolutionary War, bro. And they were carrying American flags. What, some 8 million. I think America will get serious when they see 80 million people say no kings. I think people in America will get serious when we hear bullshit like there's no birthright citizen. That next day, America should have stayed home.
Yeah.
Don't shop, don't go to school, don't go drive the damn bus, because that's a total affront to a nation of immigrants.
Yeah.
For us to even accept that, to have to go to court and argue, we just should have stayed the hell home. I mean, they crossed the line, and that thing is still hanging out there in the Supreme Court, who might just go along with the idea there's no birthright citizenship. That's total bullshit. At 14th Amendment, what are we doing? But there's so much breaking news, it just becomes a part of the information cycle, and said, okay, well, what's next? Then, you know, somebody will figure it out. But in a democracy, everybody got to figure it out. You have to have a voice. You got to pick up the phone and call your legislator. And you got to call them as frequently as it takes. And you ought not be feel like you're imposing on them, or text them, or email them and say, hell no. Because the system will respond when America push back.
So speaking of crossing big fat red lines, we have seen over the last few weeks a big discussion about what a lawful and what an unlawful order is. in the Caribbean, we have seen Pete Hegseth ordering missile strikes on, as far as what I think is public knowledge, are completely unarmed ships. We are seeing second strikes used to eliminate survivors on a vessel that is already completely disabled. Can you tell us what that kind of activity with not even there's no war, they're not enemy combatants. If our military is doing that to civilians in international waters, does that show us what might be happening? I'm not saying there are going to be missile strikes in the U.S., but does that show us what's coming for us domestically? Do you see a connection there?
Possibly, because there's been talk about deploying the military inside our cities, and that I'm not making that up. That's almost a quote.
Yeah.
Whether that's to fight gangs or to control the city or to toward an election, I don't know what the intent of that would be. But there's almost a total disregard for the Constitution and the amendments to the Constitution, where it is Congress that declared war. Now it's declared at a news conference and a different country is mentioned. I mean, coming out the box, well, we're just going to make Canada a 51st state, or we're going to take Greenland.
Mm-hmm.
Again, another day when America just should have stayed home. Nobody do nothing. But these assertions and these ideologies are coming at us so fast, it's hard to keep up with. And when we look at what's going on in the Caribbean, is the threat to invade Venezuela an information operation to distract us from something else, from the economy, from the Epstein files? Because when you become masters of misinformation and you run information operations on the American people, this could be happening right now to us again. That this is a part of a distraction. I can't imagine that we would invade Venezuela. I mean, it's a pretty big country, bigger than Texas. It's bigger than Ukraine. It's a big country with its own armed forces. And we know what happens when we go to war and the entire population is against you. That's not a good environment. It's one thing if, let's say 50% of the population wants you in and want the other people out, but to go into a country where you're going to invade it, for what purpose? That hadn't been described. And when you look at it, I used to be on the counter-drug task force when I was in the Pentagon, and back then the trade route was going through the Caribbean, coming into Key West and the Florida coast, and we shut that down, working with the Coast Guard, and put up some air drones. We shut that down, but little did we know when we shut it down. Then it moved to Mexico. Cartels were established. And it started to come in by land because much of it used to come in by fast boats. And now we're going to a throwback. Well, let's shoot the boats. Well, we had a technique for doing that. The technique was we would put, if it was outside in international waters, we'd put Coast Guardsmen on Navy ships. So you had Title 10 and Title 18 working together. Title 18 is federal law, and Title 10 is the use of the military forces. And with those Coast Guardmen on a Navy ship, we could go out and stop the boat, or either disable it with small arms and go on board, take in the traffickers, and confiscate the drugs. Now it's our responsibility. We're just going to shoot them and destroy them, kill them. That's a whole different way of responding to counter-drug operations. And by the way, the drugs are on the way to America and around the world, and Americans are buying the drugs. So that's kind of counterintuitive that, and oh, by the way, just yesterday, they pardoned a major drug dealer out of Honduras who was the president. Pardoned him.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we're going after these frontline people who may be transferring drugs in a small boat and killing them. But the guy who moved tons of drugs in the U.S. and that was tried in an American court, the American court system with information from the FBI and ATF, has been pardoned. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It's a part of that breaking news, like, what the hell are they talking about now? I'm not going to pay attention to it. And
do you believe what's happening in the Caribbean right now could potentially be an impeachable offense for Pete Hegseth? Do you see it as murder that could charges against not just Pete Hegseth for ordering it as Secretary of Defense, but for the commanders who are receiving those orders and ordering their troops to follow them out? Things like that second strike on the disabled vessel with the 2 survivors. I have seen a lot of former JAG officers describe it as a clear-cut case of murder. As a former commander, as someone who was in a position to order troop movements and to order strikes, if you received that order, would you follow it?
no,
Do you think that this is a lawful order?
if it is as it's been described, they're holding on to the first strike, they're holding on the side of the boat. If it is as it's been described, there's been so much misinformation and back talking on what happened, but we got the tape. And we got that whole engagement is recorded, I would assume, but we got the tape. If it is as has been described, the concerning part to me is there was language coming out, kill them all. Now, the Admiral has since said this morning he didn't have an order from anyone to kill them all. But and that came out of a news conference, so that's third-hand information from a senator who spoke to the Admiral this morning. He was a dynamic warrior, and he said he didn't get any order from anybody to kill them all. And they're working towards some justification for the second strike. But if it's as it's been described, they were, at that point in time, non-combatants by all rules, because this is not a war. They're carrying drugs. It's a civil offense. But we've taken a civil offense and made it a terrorist offense. And they've tagged in the word narcotics, terrorism, or words to that effect. So they have branded it like an act of war, whereas they are providing drugs to the pipeline, to the supply chain that could end up in America or could end up anywhere. And when you really look into it, Venezuela and the big boogeyman thereafter is fentanyl, is not a big provider of fentanyl.
Yeah.
Like Colombia and others, they do their share of cocaine. But the fentanyl is coming in from Mexico, from our biggest trading part, one of our biggest trading partners. China provide the enabling chemicals that makes its way to Mexico and get made into fentanyl. So I'm not sure. And the thing that scared me is the American people have not pushed back on this sufficiently. They said, I think there's other things going on why we are going after Venezuela. It has one of the biggest oil reserves in the world,
Yeah.
bigger than the U.S., bigger than Saudi Arabia. That there's a movement to do a regime change in Venezuela, and we were doing oil with Venezuela for years. They've got a heavy crude that's pretty cheap, and we've been using it, had been using it. But I think it's more about China and Russia's interest in the global South, and they've done significant investment in South America and in the Caribbean. And this is more a response to the oil oligarchs. So let's do something about this regime and bring them into the fold so we can have access to that oil. Could be the political objective, but they're not saying that. They're using the drug angle, and this guy Maduro, he's no angel. He's seemed to run a pretty corrupt operation.
Yeah, he's an authoritarian.
Yeah, I think the American people would accept it more because if he gains more influence in that part of the world, he could disrupt other governments and be a destabilizing impact on the Caribbean, Trinidad, Tobago. The entire Caribbean could be influenced if he is able to spread his authoritarian regime into other countries. So I think they just need to come clean with the American people what this is about. But going out and bombing small boats and using our most experience and skill, because we put so much resource in, to use our special welfare teams to do this don't make sense. I mean, any naval fleet operations could be doing this, and they've committed the special warfare teams to go do this. I'm not going to mention them because their brand is too good to be used for this kind of bullshit.
Yep. What do you think is motivating Pete Hegseth? Do you think that he's just, he looks at himself as like a teenage boy playing a video game? Why do you think that he approaches the United States military the way that he does? Why do you think he's obsessed with these words like lethality? And why do you think that he believes it's a good idea to convene the entire General Corps, every general in Virginia, and to lecture them?
He's kind of like an amateur magician that's starting to believe his own magic. And he's confused his role as a news person on Fox News to his role as being in the nuclear chain of command. That's a pretty serious business. And to see him on stage, because he is the Secretary of Defense, and we still got people that serve that might hear this. They've got to believe in the chain of command, but they've got to believe in the chain of command and uniformed people, and let the higher ups and the politicians sort this out. And when they get a mission, as long as you deploy, you're told to go someplace, you go. But there's a difference, as you know, between deploying and employing. There's a difference when they brought the troops to Washington and then they were told to shoot people in the leg. Said, hell no, we're not doing that. You know, so that's the obligation of our people in uniform, is that when you hear an illegal order, you've got no obligation to follow it. And our general and our flag officers are the people we expect to be between the political rhetoric and bullshit or what's really in a mission. Okay, if you want me to do that, put it in writing. We're not going to VOCO a mission to kill them all. We're not going to VOCO a mission to strike the boats with drones and blow them up. Let's get that in writing. And if it don't look right, you ought not do it. If it looks illegal. My first response on Twitter was, there's some implications there. If the situation was as it was described, and that thing's settling down somewhere in the middle, the guy's hanging on the side of the boat, as was described in many stories, then there's a lot of people implicated here, from what was said coming out of the Pentagon to the flag officer that received this order, down to the person who pulled the trigger. There's somebody looking at that target who pulled the trigger.
Yeah.
All of these people are subject to review, let's put it that, until the full facts come out. Because those troops are going to have a moral implication. That scene will stay in the back, whoever pulled that trigger. Because somebody had to tell that drone to shoot. They might be sitting in a cave in Colorado or somewhere off the coast in a ship that pulled the trigger on that drone. Their life will never be the same.
Yeah. Because
this is public knowledge now that you may have killed somebody hanging on to the side of the boat, and that's one of the laws of war that is described as an example. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there's a line that was dropped, and we can tell seemed sick to go kill anybody, and the White House is exonerated. Mm-hmm. That was the language used. And there are people, I think, who believe that now, that we can send the special warfare team in to go kill anybody, and they can be exonerated because under executive power. Yep. We got the power to do it. And the American people ought not stand for that.
One of the things that hasn't reached the news yet, and I want to be careful about the way I word this, a whistleblower has come to me and presented evidence that in a similar strike, there were survivors. They were picked up by American forces. And those American forces were first ordered to document using GoPros, them pulling these survivors out of the water. They documented using video and still photos the medical care that they received. And I believe they might have documented some of their detention. And then this whistleblower alleges, and I've seen evidence that supports this, that they were then ordered to delete all of the videos and all of the photos. Would that be a lawful order to delete photos like that? Or do you think that that would be considered as an intentional deletion of evidence?
Yeah, I don't know. I would kind of leave that to the JAG because it's not what we call, it goes into the political side of this, and the because I can't recall any regulation that say you must record this. Mm-hmm. The recording was done for amplification for a later date. It wasn't a life-threatening event. Mm-hmm. But is there some law that they were breaking? I don't know. Okay. The public has a right to know to a point, but the fact that they were told to delete it, I will leave that to the JAG officers to determine based on what policy was in the organization and where did that order come from. Mm-hmm. But I would think since it's not life-threatening, those who did that would always have questions in their mind. Why were we told to delete it? And that erodes the confidence of the warriors on the ground. And we didn't do nothing wrong. We saved lives. I mean, America loved great stories like that. Mm-hmm. And why they decided to delete it could have something to do with them really finding out, the world finding out that maybe this wasn't what it appeared to be in blowing this thing up, or these people were identified. Normally when we pick up people in the past, in my time in service, we interrogated them and put them in jail and found out where were they pulling the drug, who they were working for, and many of them, those people still in jail for being narco traffickers. But it was an unusual order, but I can't speak to the severity of why they would say eliminate a tape of us saving a life. But this culture we have now is a culture of cruelty coming out of this administration, and we want to show how cruel we can be to amplify our lethality. This language has gotten into the lexicon of you're not just accomplishing the mission, but we want you to be lethal.
Yeah.
We want you to, and how do you interpret that? To the technician, we want to see the target and be able to hit it. I think that's being translated now. We want you to kill it. Not disable it, disarm it. You know, we went into missions, kill, capture, or destroy. And it appears now the emphasis on the definition of lethal is kill or destroy, as opposed to accomplish the mission. There's no C in there, no capture in that concept. And I don't know how that's translated out to our soldiers, sailors, and airmen and Marines. Some of them that have been floating in the Caribbean since before the 4th of July. And we've had Labor Day come, we've had Thanksgiving come, and now we're approaching Christmas, and they're still floating out there chasing itty-bitty boats with a third of our freaking Navy deployed to the Caribbean over what we say is a war on drugs, and it makes no sense.
Yeah. The word that they're using to try to justify these strikes is terrorist. They're not saying narco traffickers, they're saying narco terrorists.
Yeah, that's the word.
At the same time, we have an administration that has put out both an executive order and a presidential memorandum on national security that brands Antifa, anti-fascism, as a terrorist organization. I've got the word Veterans Fighting Fascism is the name of the organization that I run. I am very proud to describe myself as an anti-fascist. I come from a long line of anti-fascists who fought in World War II against the Italians and the Germans. My grandmother, and this shaped her entire life, my grandmother lost one of her older brothers in the European theater fighting fascists. How do you see what's going on with the designation of narco-terrorists and the use of weapons of war and the posture of war in international waters? How do you connect that to the designation of Antifa as a terrorist organization here stateside? Is this just bluster, or do you think that this is telegraphing a much more aggressive, physically aggressive and legally aggressive posture that someone like me ought to be concerned with?
I think all citizens ought to be concerned with it because they've used that language to describe the opposition party. They've used that language. Some of the leadership had in their exuberance on the conservative stations. When we did the 1-6 investigation, I had a conversation with a senior staffer, and my job was, and the team I had of 16, was to look at improving the security at the Capitol. And one of the things we determined we needed was more police for the Capitol because of the threats coming to the congressional staffers, primarily on the congressional side, not the Senate side. Now it's both sides. They get threats every day. but we needed more police to escort them, to the ones that were getting hot threats, to have people escort them home even, or to secure them at their home. We needed more police. And I asked the staff, I said, we're looking at what are the laws on domestic terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have one. And I said, well, why don't we have a law on domestic terrorism? And the staff said, because they vote.
Yeah.
That was our answer. They vote. And we still don't have a law on domestic terrorism. Now they use the word and classifying this particular organization as domestic terrorist. And it becomes a talking point. Again, another breaking news event to classify them as domestic terrorists. Well, we've missed some of the primary players on 1/6 who could be described as domestic terrorists because their intent was to take violent action to influence a political outcome. The definition of terrorism is to force through violence as required to influence political outcome. But domestic terrorism now can be described by using language.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't have to hold a gun now to start a movement that inspires domestic terrorism to a point of influencing the political outcome in America. You do it by information.
Mm-hmm.
But to single out this one organization, and there are some known domestic terrorist groups in America, and they've been operational since the Civil War, and they're still there.
Yep.
But for whatever reason, it becomes quite popular particularly on the conservative channels, to target this particular group. And I haven't seen them in the courts. You know, if we can find Osama bin Laden, we could find domestic terrorism if we wanted in America. And that hadn't happened. As good as the FBI is and the CIA who works overseas, I don't see cases where they're actually charging people for their belief. Because but that is where they want to go. They want to be able to charge people because you have a different belief than they do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're picking women up in Texas for talking about getting an abortion. They want to be able to stop people from coming to the country by looking at their phones and said, hey, you spoke badly about the Secretary of State, and we're not going to allow you. So they now want to prosecute people because of their thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And this term, anti-fascist, is just a cool term to attack and said, okay, they don't believe in fascism, so we're going to go after them.
Mm-hmm. Because
the word fascism is in that title. But they don't have a skyscraper building in D.C. They don't have a corporate headquarters in Houston or Texas. It's an idea. It's like to a way the terrorists we fought. They didn't have a Pentagon headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
They were driven by an idea. And you could kill the leader and the organization still operate. You can't kill an idea by the Department of Justice come out and said, no, we're going to declare them as a terrorist group. You're not going to kill the idea. You and I both know that. The idea is we're going to push back on the concept. When I say we, that group is going to push back on the concept of fascism. And then you see the side stories come out of shithole countries. You see the side stuff come out. Well, these people are garbage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who speaks like that? But when you hear that kind of language so much, people stop getting excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because hold my beer, because in a few minutes they're gonna come out with some other dumb shit. Just stand by. And much of that is a distraction. And they are masters at distraction. But at the same time, which one do we take serious? Are we really going to attack Venezuela? We know we're attacking these little unarmed boats. What will happen next?
General Honoré, one of the things that when I used to use Twitter, I don't anymore. One of the most common refrains I think I used to see anytime that there was some sort of misuse of the military, not just stateside, like using the military against protesters, like clearing Lafayette Square back in 2020, but also, when Trump let the Iranians bomb soldiers in Iraq after he killed Soleimani. I saw a lot of people using the phrase "Where are the generals?" And for years, I've been pointing to you. But it seems like you're in a lonely place. You're not the only retired general. Where are you disappointed in some of your peers for not speaking up, for not continuing to serve their country in the way that you have? I started this off asking you, why haven't you just retired? Are you surprised that it seems like a lot of other former general officers have just retired and they're quiet now?
Well, you make a reasonable living and a comfortable retirement as a general, but most of them still have a second half. Many of them sit on boards of defense contracting companies, or they are speakers, public speakers, but a lot of them go into some form of commerce, consultants. And I've got organizations I work with now that normally my name would be on the board. It's not on the board. I work as an advisor because those corporations are trying to do business with the government. And my name being as a member of the board would be a non-starter to deal with. I got fired from a board position doing work with the Green Army, which is a volunteer organization. I was on a board for a company out of Atlanta that was paying me handsome. They had stock and met 4 times a year. I almost felt guilty in taking the money, over $100,000 a year. And I'd go to a meeting with a community that had a disruption at a plant next door that caused the people to get sick, to go to hospitals. And we went and meet in a civil roundtable discussion with the companies involved. And the companies said, we'll tell you what, if you sign this paper that you will not sue us, we'll pay for your medical bills. And I said, that's bullshit. Well, one of them companies ended up being Shell Oil. Shell Oil was negotiating, and they did their homework. They knew I was on the board of this company that was going to do a contingency contract with Shell in case they had a BP type event in the Gulf, and this company would do contingency work. So they called the company up and said, hey, with that guy Honoré on your board, we're not going to give you that contingency contract. So the board members came to me. I mean, the company got 7,000 employees. I mean, that's a lot of people. I don't want to disadvantage the company, and I was doing well in other business. So I stepped away from it. Didn't fight it. It was the gentleman thing to do. It was building wealth, but I didn't need that to live on. But I had another 3 or 4 years I could have been on that board. After I did the 1/6 investigation, my speaking engagements fell off the cliff. Because I'd go around and talk about preparedness and leadership and got great reviews. But now I don't get past the speaking committee for conventions. Now, COVID had something to do with it, but the convention business is back on the street. But I don't get the job because I'm outspoken about saving the democracy. And some people think that, well, he's against the president, so we don't want anybody like that come and speak. That might slip and say something offensive to the king. So my speaking, but it comes at a cost if you speak up. And I think a lot of flag officers fall in that category. They won't say one either way. They won't speak either way. They say, well, we're apolitical. And we ought not speak up. There's a platoon of them that says we ought not ever say anything going on in government. You know, we ought to be out of politics. Many of them take issue with the speech that General Milley said, we don't serve kings, we serve the Constitution. A lot of people totally disagree with him being that forthcoming while he's in uniform that we serve the Constitution, we don't serve a king or a person. So there are people that are quite capable. You see a few of them on television and they lean forward. Many of those are paid. The ones that you see regularly are paid. I'm not paid because when I was being paid to cover hurricanes for a major network, they wouldn't let me talk on another network. And I found that confining. So I don't take pay to speak about saving the goddamn democracy. But many of them you see on television, their words are measured because they're associated with Fortune 500 companies, or in some cases they're leading them. And their words are measured to some degree. And then some of them are just outright, they say what's on their mind. But to a degree that you got to remember, most of those that are speaking also are still in commerce, and their words are very measured.
Yep. Well, General, I want to thank you for coming on and spending all this time with us. I have just one more minute before we have to wrap. How can the people listening to this podcast go on offense for our democracy?
Be engaged in local politics. You can't be an observer, you got to be a player. Whether it's a school board meeting or the county parish meeting, and have your red lines. I'm not going to vote in for anybody that don't believe in climate change, because this stuff is happening. Just don't vote for them. And you don't just take one issue, but what is the culmination of all the issues? I'm not going to vote for anybody that don't believe the right for people to make decisions about their body. I'm not going to vote for people that suppress the right for people to express their First Amendment. So be an aware voter, but have your red lines and engage. Because if you don't speak up, people are going to think you're going along to get along. And in democracy, you cannot save a democracy by going along to get along. But if you put, and a lot of people, you can't blame them in some cases because they remain silent in the office when people are talking shit because they don't want to jeopardize their job. And that's okay to remain silent, but you don't have to go along with it. And there's too many people being suppressed because the powers that be, the people who own the media, the people that own the big companies, many of them are coming out and they're supporting these policies that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and they're okay with that, and suppressing the population. So I think wherever you are, you got to be in the game in some kind of way and participate in the democracy. Because if you don't participate, that means you're going along to get along, and that could be a very miserable place. I tell them, the boomers, particularly the retired people, be engaged. Because if all you're doing between breakfast and lunch is figuring out where you're going to lunch, they're measuring your damn coffee. You need to be engaged because you got the freedom of movement, the freedom of speech, and you ought to use it. Not like some of the young people who are caught into these cabals where the conversation is about how we can support the latest breaking news and believe that we're really striking these boats over drugs. I mean, don't fall for the bullshit. But my intent is not to get between the soldiers and their chain of command. Because the last thing we want to do, they've got to understand that this too will pass. We've been through bullshit before. So do your orders, follow the Constitution. Remember, you're fighting for the country, or prepared to fight for the country. And you can be told to go anywhere. It's how you execute that mission. Is what makes the difference in alliance with your oath and in alliance with the law. So we need you in uniform. We still need them to volunteer and join, because this bullshit will pass too.
Well, General, thank you so much for spending all this time with us. It's a real honor to meet you, and I hope to have you back on this show again. Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.
General Russel Honoré is a man who embodies selfless service, a core value of the U.S. Army that every soldier is taught. It's a lesson I hope today's troops have taken seriously, because when the military is used as a tool of political intimidation, then it's not just our freedoms at risk, it's the soul of our democracy. We can't afford to wait for things to get worse. We need to get organized. If you don't know where to start local. I've posted a free resource on my nonprofit's website at veteransfightingfascism.org. There, you'll find guides to help you start an anti-fascist book club. It's everything you need to put aside the excuses and get active, to pull your friends off the sidelines and start making a difference where you can, locally. Subscribe to On Offense on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube at VALOR Media Network. Leave a 5-star rating and review so that more people can find the show. Want to go deeper? Go to weareonoffense.com. You can sign up for my Substack there, get connected to Task Force Butler and Veterans Fighting Fascism, and find more ways to get involved. Follow at On Offense Pod on every platform: Threads, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. And tell your people about this episode. We're building something here, and we can only win if we do it together. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and paying subscribers to the On Offense Substack get early access to video episodes as soon as I get them from my editors, before they go live anywhere else. I'm Chris Goldsmith. Thanks for listening. On Offense is produced by Gina Kim as part of the VALOR Media Network. Let's go on offense.